I'm a beginner knitter, and here is everything I have made in my first 2 months of knitting. Hi, my name is Sydney, and I am a lover of all crafts. However, I didn't really get into knitting until just about 2 months ago. As you can see, I was a crocheter for about 8 years. I've made a few articles of clothing through crochet, like this vest here, but I never really ventured into knitting, mostly because I was kind of scared of it. If you hear any grunting or growling, my dog just likes to make noises sometimes. But yeah, I've crocheted for about 8 years, and I mostly made like home decor and accessories, but I did venture into making clothes a little bit. The reason why I haven't made a lot of crochet clothes is, for me, the fabric just isn't what I want for like casual sweaters and stuff like that. If you don't know, like crocheted fabric doesn't stretch very well, and it tends to be a bit on the like thicker side. It doesn't lay super flat. It doesn't drape very well in my opinion. And I think the biggest factor is that it really doesn't stretch very much, especially depending on the yarn that you're using. But just in general, crocheted stitches don't allow for much stretch. So I really wanted to start knitting so that I could make more sweaters that I would wear frequently. The reason that I actually decided to jump into knitting is because of a woman named Alex James. I found her on TikTok, but she's on Instagram and YouTube as well. She posted a video on TikTok in December, I think, saying that she had just started knitting last February, and she made a video of all the sweaters that she knitted in 2024, which I think she had made like 4 or 5 sweaters, and I was just so inspired by that. I was so impressed because making sweaters just seemed really intimidating. I had knit a few like dishcloths and washcloths before, and knitting was just kind of scary for me because fixing mistakes seemed so much harder in knitting than it is in crochet, because with crochet you can just like undo a few stitches and then redo them again. Before I start this video, I just want to preface that the intention of this video is not to be like, you know, braggy and like, look at how many sweaters I've made in 2 months. Like, it's not meant to be like a competition or a measure of quantity or anything like that. I tend to dive headfirst into hobbies. That's just how I am. Once I get into something, I do not stop being into that something until I, you know, put it down for a while. I really just want to showcase that a beginner is capable of making sweaters, because that's what got me into knitting in the first place, is watching Alex's video and seeing that as a beginner knitter, she just jumped right into sweaters and she made some beautiful sweaters. So that's kind of the intention here, is for those people who maybe are scared of knitting, or maybe you're an experienced knitter but you haven't made a sweater yet, just to say it's really not as scary as it looks. There are lots of patterns out there that are great for beginner knitters, and all of the sweaters that I'm going to mention in this video are totally beginner friendly. Any of these sweaters could be your first sweater. So yeah, let's dive in. So Alex James mentioned in her video that the first sweater that she made was the Step-by-Step sweater by Florence Miller, which is also the first sweater that I made. You can see here, it's very pretty. The pattern is free on Ravelry, and she also has a free video tutorial on YouTube. So if you're completely new to knitting, she like really holds your hand and walks you through everything. This is knit in the round top down. It starts with several rows of ribbing to make this nice turtleneck, and then it has double raglan increases. So as you can see, this has like a really nice double raglan seam. I just think that it looks so polished and crisp and just really put together. I love the double raglan on this sweater. One thing about this sweater, I did not make the sleeves long enough. Eventually I'll go back and maybe add like another cream stripe before the cuff, because it's basically long enough when my arms are like down by my sides, but if I'm doing anything with my arms, the sleeves come up and it kind of drives me a little bit nuts. So eventually I'll go in and fix that, but I'm really proud of this sweater. One thing that is pretty noticeable when you look at it is on the back. For these first couple of stripes, you can see these jogs here where I changed colors for the first couple of times. Florence does explain like later in the video how to minimize those jogs, but I unfortunately did not see that part of the video until I was already on the body section, which once you switch to the body, you change the beginning of round to like the side, like in the armpit area. And you can still see some jogs on the side here, but they're not as noticeable because at that point I had watched that part of the video, but also they're on the side of the sweater, so like no one really sees it. But overall, I think this sweater was really nice. The yarn that I used was Drops Nepal, which is this 65% wool, 35% alpaca yarn. And the colors that I use, this green is 8921 and this cream is 0206. I'm not super sensitive to animal fibers, so for me it is soft enough to wear close to my skin. It's not the softest yarn, but it's very affordable, it's accessible, and I really like the stitch definition that it makes in the fabric. Yeah, I would use this yarn again. It's nice, it's warm, it's inexpensive, and it makes a nice looking sweater. So that is sweater number 1. Okay, so moving on, my second and third sweaters are by the same designer, and they're pretty much the same pattern, except with different weights of yarn. So I'm sure you could like modify it based on your gauge swatch and then just do some math to like figure out and not buy 2 patterns. But I did buy both of the patterns because I am an inexperienced knitter. This is the Gallant sweater by Caidree. I'm not sure how you say that name. I'm going to say Caidree. I'll post links to all of the patterns below. I'll link you to the Ravelry patterns, as well as any like video tutorials that I find helpful. This sweater was pretty simple for me after doing the step-by-step sweater. It's a very similar sort of construction, except at the top here, there's not any ribbing. On this one, I did just 1 row of ribbing at the very top. She recommends, if you have a yarn that tends to roll, to do 2 rows of ribbing. I just did 1 here. I think if I were to make it again, I would do 2 because I did kind of have to aggressively block this. But yeah, it's again knit in the round top down raglan increases, but this just has a single raglan increase as opposed to the double raglan increase like on the step-by-step sweater. This is just a really beautiful, lightweight, Aran weight sweater. It worked up so quickly. I forgot to mention the step-by-step sweater. My first sweater took me about 2.5 weeks to make from start to finish. This one took me exactly 1 week to make. I cannot put down a project once I start it. I'm kind of obsessed. But also, the yarn is a little bit of a thicker weight. It is an Aran weight sweater, so it worked up really quickly. It was very fun to make. This yarn is by Wool and the Gang. It is Feeling Good yarn. It is a 70% baby alpaca, 7% merino, 23% recycled nylon, and this is in the color Rocky Gray. It's very pretty. I think this is considered like a 1-ply yarn, which both baby alpaca and 1-ply yarn don't have a lot of resilience to them, which I believe is why there's a considerable amount of nylon in here to sort of help it hold up. Also, I don't know if this is considered like brushed or like blown yarn. I don't know a lot about how yarn is made yet. That is a hobby that I have not yet gotten into, is spinning yarn, but who knows, maybe later this year I'll have another hobby. But this yarn is just so soft. It's so soft and it's really lightweight. I love the fabric of this sweater. It is pretty warm, even though it is lightweight. It's so luxuriously soft. I love it so much. Another thing about this sweater is that I actually did not meet gauge. I used the recommended needle size. I think I ended up having more stitches than I was supposed to per inch. And I followed this tutorial by Wool Needles Hands, who is a podcaster on YouTube. I love all of her videos. I watch her nonstop while I'm knitting. Highly recommend her podcast. She has a video on how to explain how to choose your size within a pattern based on your gauge swatch, so that you don't have to, you know, change needles or change yarn. You can just go based off of how many stitches you have in your gauge swatch and do a little bit of very simple math to figure out which size to choose. I am terrible at math, so I'm not going to be able to explain it very well to you, but she explains it very clearly and makes it very easy, and I did end up choosing the right size. I'll put in some B-roll of me wearing the sweater, but I think it fits really well. I like it a lot. So shout out to Wool Needles Hands. I love, her name's Taylor Earl. Her videos are just great. So yeah, that is the Gallant Sweater Air and Weight edition. Moving on to my third sweater, which is also a Gallant sweater by Caidree, but this is the mohair edition. Oh, I love this sweater. It's just so pretty. Yeah, it's just 2 strands of mohair kid silk held together, and it's just this beautiful cobalt color. I don't have much to say about this sweater because it is pretty much the same as the last one, just you know, different gauge. It does have that single raglan increase like it did before on the other sweater. I did end up doing 2 rows of ribbing at the top here to help the shape of the collar, and it worked really well. And this was actually the first sweater that I made full-length sleeves on. So you'll see in the video of me trying on these sweaters that even when I move my arms around, they're still full length. Wow, incredible what a bit of patience will do. So yeah, I might make a video in the future of me going back and fixing some mistakes on my old sweaters, but so far it's just the length of the sleeves on the first 2 sweaters. But I do think it's worth doing. I have some extra yarn, so yeah, I just really like having full-length sleeves. All of the sweaters that I've made, all 3 of them, are slightly cropped, which is perfect for my body proportions. I have quite large hips, so I feel like if I have like a full-length sweater, it like kind of bunches up. So I like a little bit of a cropped sweater. And I wear a lot of high-waisted pants, so it sort of just like hits right around my belt area, which I think is just the most flattering length for me. This took me 13 days to make, so just under 2 weeks. I thought it was going to take me a lot longer because the yarn is just so fine, but with the needle size that it recommends, I can't remember, might be like a 4.5 millimeter or 5 millimeter, it actually ends up working up pretty quickly. The yarn that I used is Drops Kid Silk in this really pretty like cobalt blue. The color is number 21. It is a lace weight yarn, and I think it's like 75%, hold on, yeah, 75% mohair and 25% silk. This sweater just has such a nice like fuzzy texture and just this beautiful halo effect. I love this sweater. I think this is like my favorite thing that I've ever made. Sorry, that's my dog. I think this is my favorite thing that I've ever made, and I've made a lot of things. But yeah, it's just so lovely. I think this color looks really nice with my skin tone and my hair color. So those are all of my completed patterns, but I do want to talk a little bit about my current work in progress, which is the Anchor sweater by Petite Knit. I wanted to take a step away from basic stockinette sweaters for a minute because I was just getting a little bit bored with just doing raglan increase, stockinette stitch, even though, you know, those sweaters are all very beautiful and they really helped me to even out my tension and just build some basic techniques. I wanted to do something with a little bit of texture. So as you can see, the entire top like yoke of this sweater is worked in 1x1 rib. And I'm using 1 strand of Nordic wool held together with 1 strand of kid silk mohair. And it's a really nice color, it's a really nice texture. Ever since I started on the stockinette section, it rolls up like crazy, so you really can't see the stockinette section unless I like roll it down intentionally. But yeah, I think I'm about like halfway through the body. I'm going to be working a lot on this today, and then so it has ribbing down at the bottom of the sweater and then at the cuffs as well. I'm using, sorry if I mispronounce this because I do not know Norwegian diction, This is Tin Purgant, and it's 100% Norwegian wool. And this is the color Blackberry, I think. It doesn't say. I remember it saying Blackberry, but I think the label's in Norwegian. I think the color is 4672, perhaps. But it's just this really gorgeous, like, deep plum. And this, I think, is a sport weight yarn. Could be wrong there. But it's not very itchy. Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable wearing this against my skin. And it's going to be very warm. Again, I'm using Drops Kid Silk for my mohair. This is color 5. I think it's called Heather, which this is not, as you can see, an exact color match. Heatnit does recommend using the Sandnes Garn mohair silk option, which I'm sure I could get an exact color match there. They do have the blackberry color in the silk mohair, but their silk mohair is very expensive, and I was already kind of shelling out for the wool, so I went with a cheaper option. Even though it's not an exact color match, I do like the overall effect that the color combination gives. I've been working on this for about a week now. The ribbing like kind of killed me, I'm not gonna lie. I knew going into this that I do not like doing ribbing. And the first few sections here, like I think up until here, I was like holding my needles with like a death grip. And at one point I noticed that my right thumb was starting to hurt, and I was like, oh, that sucks. And then the next day I was like in pain, and I could not knit for that entire day. So I had to put down my knitting for a couple of days, and then I picked it back up and I figured out a rhythm and a hand posture that worked for me without, you know, death gripping my needles. And I think I've really improved my ribbing and my hand posture when it comes to ribbing. And yeah, I think I've got it figured out now. I will say I did kind of make a mistake in counting. The top couple of rows here, it's supposed to be 10 rows of ribbing for all 5 of these ribbing sections, but I miscounted. I think I have like 9 in the first 2, and then maybe 9 in the 4th one as well. So in the 5th ribbing section, I did like 13 rows to make up for the ones that I skipped, but I think it looks intentional, especially since it's like the bottom row of ribbing that's longer. But I like the way it looks so far. I'm excited. I did not gauge swatch for this. I am a firm believer that you need to gauge swatch, especially when you're making garments. I did not, because I heard that you're supposed to gauge swatch in the round when you are knitting sweaters in the round, which makes sense because your tension might be different knitting in the round versus knitting flat. But my thought was, oh, well, I'll just start the sweater and, you know, measure my gauge once I have a few inches, and then if it's wrong, I'll just start over. But the top section is all in ribbing, and the gauge is measured in stockinette stitch, so I really couldn't measure my gauge until I got down to like all the way here. And when I did measure, I had, I think it was either 23 or 24 stitches per 10 centimeters, and it's supposed to be 20 stitches. So before I separated the sleeves from the body, I, you know, did the calculations that Wool Needles Hands does in that video, and I decided that I was going to size down one. So I was originally making the large size, and I was going to size down to do the medium size since I had more stitches per inch. But when I did that and I separated the sleeves from the body, it felt too tight, and I was really confused why my gauge had more stitches per inch, but when I sized down it was too tight. It didn't make sense to me. Still doesn't make sense to me. But I ended up going back to the large size, and it does fit around my body. I'm kind of confused about like the overall fit of the garment, like what it's gonna look like when it's finished, just because it's really hard to tell when it continuously rolls up like this. But I think regardless, it's gonna be a pretty sweater, and I'm excited to finish it. I think soon I will make a video of what is in my queue on Ravelry, so if you're interested in that, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, give it a like, give it a comment. Yeah, so thank you for joining me for this video, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye!